There comes a time in life when you realize that the loudest noise isn't outside of you, it's inside. It's the voice that constantly compares, the urge to prove, the fear of being misunderstood. Wait, we chase validation, try to please everyone, and speak when silence would have healed us more. But eventually, the exhaustion sets in, not from others, but from abandoning ourselves again and again. That's when you learn it's not selfish to focus on yourself. It's sacred, it's powerful, and it's necessary. You begin to understand that growth doesn't need an audience. Healing doesn't need a stage. And peace doesn't come from explaining yourself to people who were never listening to begin with. There's strength in working quietly, there's wisdom in protecting your energy. And there's freedom in not reacting to every opinion, every challenge, every expectation. You don't have to broadcast your journey. You don't have to post every victory or justify every decision. Sometimes the most powerful transformations happen in silence and no one sees, when no one claps. But when you decide to reclaim your life anyway, don't focus on yourself. Not to escape the world, but to come back to it whole and stay silent. Not because you have nothing to say, but because you've learned that peace is louder than noise. There is a misconception in this world that the louder you are, the stronger you are. The stronger you are. That if you don't speak back, you're being passive. That silence means surrender. But silence isn't weakness. It's restraint, it's strength disguised as stillness. When you choose not to respond to every insult, every doubt, every misunderstanding, you're not giving up the fight. You're choosing not to waste your energy on battles that don't matter. And that is wisdom most people never learn. Silence doesn't mean you don't have words. It means you value your peace more than being right. It means you're not interested in reacting, you're focused on responding. Calmly, consciously, and only when necessary. It takes more courage to stay quiet when your pride is wounded than to lash out and regret it later. There's a different kind of power in a person who can observe, absorb, and walk away without needing to prove a point. Not everything requires your voice. Some things deserve your silence. When you go quiet, people often mistake it for weakness because they don't understand that silence is a decision, not an absence. You choose silence when you know your words won't change minds already closed. You choose silence when you understand that inner peace is more valuable than outer attention. You choose silence when you've outgrown the need to explain yourself to people who've already made up their minds. And in that silence, something extraordinary happens. Your voice returns to you, not as noise, but as clarity. The truth is, strength isn't measured by how loud you are in the moment, but by how still you can remain in the storm. Silence teaches you to listen, not just to others, but to yourself. It reveals what's real, what's necessary, and what's simply noise. In a world addicted to reaction, silence is your revolution. It's not empty. It's full of power, intention, and peace that doesn't need permission. We live in a world that glorifies visibility. The more people who see you, applaud you, or validate your journey, the more real it seems. But real growth isn't loud. It doesn't happen under a spotlight or on a stage. It happens in moments when no one is watching. When you're alone with your thoughts, fighting silent battles, choosing healing over habits, discipline over distraction. That's where transformation begins. Not in performance, but in privacy. The world might not clap for you when you choose to get out of bed on a hard day. No one may see the nights you cry yourself to sleep and still wake up determined to try again. Growth happens when you learn to sit with your pain without numbing it, when you choose forgiveness over resentment even though no one is keeping score. These are quiet victories, but they are the ones that shape your character. Not your image, not your reputation, but your truth. The pressure to be seen often pulls us away from the very process that's meant to change us. We start curating instead of healing. We begin performing instead of becoming. But growth doesn't need an audience. It needs intention, consistency, and time. There's nothing glamorous about it. It's messy, uncomfortable, and slow. But it's in those private moments, when you choose to stay instead of run, to reflect instead of react, that the deepest change begins to take root. Don't be afraid to disappear for a while. Let the world wonder what you're doing. Let the silence stretch long enough for you to hear yourself again. Because when you return, not just to the world, but to your own soul, you'll come back stronger, softer, wiser. And you'll know that the most powerful growth wasn't in what you showed others. It was in what you reclaimed for yourself. Quietly, privately, patiently. There comes a point in life when you no longer crave noise, not the external kind and not the internal chaos either. You start to realize that your peace is not just a feeling, it's a place within you that took years to build. And once you've touched it, truly touched that stillness inside yourself, you begin to protect it like sacred ground, because you've learned the cost of chaos. Because you've learned the cost of chaos. You've lived through the noise of people's opinions, expectations, and drama. And now, you know what you're no longer willing to trade. Noise isn't always loud. Sometimes it shows up in the form of unnecessary conversations, arguments that drain you, or relationships that leave you unsettled. It can be the constant need to explain, to defend, to prove that your choices are valid. But peace doesn't argue. It doesn't beg to be understood. Peace sits quietly and reminds you, you don't owe the world your energy just because it demands your attention. You get to choose where your soul rests, and not everything deserves a seat at that table. There is nothing more valuable than peace of mind. When you have it, you sleep better, breathe deeper, and think more clearly. You stop reacting to things that used to trigger you. You stop carrying other people's chaos as if it's your responsibility to fix. Choosing peace often looks like walking away when you'd rather speak. It looks like saying nothing, not because you're scared, but because your silence holds more wisdom than their noise ever could. Peace isn't passive, it's powerful, and it often speaks loudest when it says nothing at all. You won't find peace in the middle of noise if you don't first decide it's worth protecting. That means drawing boundaries. That means letting go of the need to always be involved, always be right, always be heard. You don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. You don't have to sacrifice your inner calm just to meet the chaos of someone else. Your peace, hard-earned, quietly built, deeply felt, is not up for negotiation. It is your home, and no noise is worth burning it down for. We often live under the illusion that we owe ourselves to everyone. Our time, our explanations, our space, our energy. But the truth is, not everyone earns the right to walk into your life and stay. You don't have to open your heart to people who only want to read the first chapter and judge the whole story. You don't have to drain yourself trying to be everything for people who would never do the same for you. Same for you. Your energy is not free. It is sacred. And learning to protect it is not selfish. It's survival. There is nothing unkind about boundaries. Boundaries are not walls. They are gates. You get to choose who walks through and who stays out. And the more you grow, the more you'll realize that peace doesn't come from pleasing everyone. It comes from choosing wisely who gets access to your inner world. Because not everyone clapping for you is clapping out of love. Some people come close only to distract, to drain, or to control. Silence in those moments becomes your filter. It tells you who truly sees you and who only sees what they can take from you. You don't have to explain your boundaries to people who benefit from you not having them. Gaben. If someone is offended by your silence, your distance, or your refusal to overextend, they were never looking out for you in the first place. The more you begin to honor your own emotional space, the more you'll notice how uncomfortable it makes people who are only connected to you through your willingness to overgive. Let them be uncomfortable. Let them leave if they must. The right people will never be threatened by your growth. There's strength in choosing yourself, not out of arrogance, but out of awareness. Because when your energy is scattered, you can't focus. When you're constantly available to others, you become unavailable to yourself. Protecting your energy means saying no, stepping back, and sometimes staying silent. It means preserving your inner light, so it's not dimmed by people who refuse to see its worth. You are not required to shrink for anyone's comfort. The more you protect your energy, the more you reclaim your power, quietly, intentionally, and without apology. That from a young age, we are taught to seek approval from parents, teachers, society, even strangers. We learn that our value is often measured by how others perceive us, how many compliments we receive, how many people applaud our efforts. But that need for validation slowly becomes a cage. You begin to tailor your life around applause, not authenticity. And the scariest part is, the more you chase validation, the further you drift from your own voice. You stop asking, what feels right to me? And start asking, what will they think of me? Living for validation is exhausting. It's a race that never ends. Because no matter how much you give, how much you change, how much you perform, someone will still disapprove. Someone will still criticize. And you'll keep shrinking yourself, editing your truth, softening your power, all to fit into someone else's version of you. But what if you stopped asking for permission to be yourself? What if, instead of begging to be seen, you turned inward and remembered who you were before the world told you who to be? That's where self-worth begins, in the quiet moments when you remind yourself that you are enough, not because someone says so, but because you exist. You don't need a stage, a title, or 1,000 likes to be worthy. You need honesty. You need alignment. You need alignment. You need to stop performing and start being essential. And when you recognize your worth, you stop reacting to every opinion, every silence, every rejection. You realize that someone else's inability to value you does not reduce your value. Their approval doesn't define your truth. You do. Staying silent in a world that demands constant noise can be a radical act of self-worth. You don't have to post your progress. You don't have to announce your healing. You don't have to dress up your vulnerability for public consumption. You just have to be real with yourself. Because the day you stop living for applause is the day you begin living in peace. And that peace, born of self-worth, is not given to you. It's claimed quietly and powerfully from within. There are wounds the world will never see. Moments when you wanted to fall apart but held yourself together anyway. Nights you spent wiping your own tears. Mornings when you rose with trembling hands but still chose to face the day. These silent battles, the ones no one applauds, are the ones that build your inner armor. Strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet decision to keep going when every part of you wants to give up. That's the kind of courage no one teaches you. You earn it through survival. When you're fighting silent battles, people may think you're okay because you smile. They may think you're unaffected because you don't speak, but they don't see the internal war, the fight to stay kind in a world that keeps wounding you, the effort it takes to not become bitter when life has been unfair. And yet, through it all, you keep choosing to grow. Not because it's easy, but because something inside you refuses to let the pain make you hard. That resilience is your quiet superpower. There's something sacred about the strength that's built in solitude. When you face life's storms without announcing them to the world, you learn how to anchor yourself. You stop looking for rescue and become your own refuge. You stop screaming for understanding and begin listening to your own voice. And slowly, without realizing it, you become someone who carries both softness and steel, gentle on the outside, unbreakable on the inside. That's what silent battles create. A warrior with a tender heart and an indestructible soul. Transformation is deeply personal. It doesn't happen when others notice you changing. It happens when you begin to notice yourself changing. But too often, we spend more time looking outward than inward. We seek feedback, reactions, and validation from the world instead of pausing to ask, am I proud of who I'm becoming? Real transformation asks you to disconnect from the noise and reconnect with your soul. It requires you to pay attention to your wounds, your patterns, your growth, not to impress others, but to heal yourself. When you constantly live under the gaze of others, you begin to edit yourself. You perform rather than evolve. You become so focused on proving you've changed that you miss the real work of actually changing. True transformation doesn't demand attention. It demands intention. It's about doing the work even when no one is watching. It's about making small, quiet choices. Waking up early, breaking old cycles, walking away from what no longer serves you. Not because someone else sees, but because you do. The most meaningful growth doesn't come from public declarations. It comes from private discipline. It comes from learning to listen to yourself, honor yourself, and hold yourself accountable. When you stop seeking others' attention, you free yourself from the exhausting cycle of approval. You begin to focus on what truly matters, inner alignment. You begin to give yourself what the world could never offer in full: clarity, purpose, and peace. That is where real transformation is born, not in the spotlight, but in the silence behind it. You don't need anyone to witness your evolution for it to be real. The world may not understand your quiet shift, and that's okay. This journey is yours. Water your roots, not your reputation. Tend to your inner garden with patience, not performance. Because the most powerful version of you won't come from being seen. It will come from being known deeply by the one person who truly matters in your transformation: you. So if there's one thing you take from this, let it be this: you are allowed to protect your peace. You are allowed to choose silence over chaos, solitude over noise, and healing over attention. You don't owe the world your exhaustion. You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. The world will keep spinning whether you shout or whisper, whether you're seen or unseen. But your soul, it only grows in stillness. It only heals when you stop explaining yourself and start listening to yourself. Let that be your revolution, not in noise, not in proving, but in being. Quietly, powerfully, unapologetically. Focus on yourself, stay silent. And watch how your life begins to speak in ways your words never could.